All right.
Heading up there. She wants to go on outside.
For years, the sort of distance between you and your students. I would like to retire.
Understand me for starters.
Yes.
It's not too bad. Sometimes. My wife says she can't. After 50 years, she still can't understand it. So. Right. We're going to go to the museum.
This is my first trip back on the scene again.
Anybody wants to take a seat? And I'll give you a quick get more sense now. But anyway, so the order was founded in 1233 in Italy. It moved then across Europe, came to England in 64, and established a house in Oxfordshire, Benburb in Oxfordshire in England, and other places. There's another place in Manchester, and they were up in Scotland in Aberdeen. They came in 1949, and from that they've had a presence until today. And today there's only one here, and he's like the rest of us on the wrong side of 15. Anyway, that's the story of the service, and this just tells a little bit about it. He wrote a biography of it in 1644, and I'll show you a copy of that book. We have a copy of it in our library from 1644. That's the page, that's the page in the book there, and you'll see where it's written here, 1644. Over the shoulder, you'll see here this drawn as a photo of Seamus Heaney, the poet laureate. We've all heard of Seamus Heaney. There was a prior here who was very big into literature and art, and he would have been in contact with all the literati of the day. Brad Friel, any of them you can name, Michael MacLean Moore, Eugene McKibb. He had Heaney here teaching English as a distance course. It was written between 1601 and 1611, I think. I hope somebody will keep me right on this. I hope I haven't got the dates wrong. Don't worry if you feel that you want to correct me, do so. I have no problem with that. But as I said, when we were getting it restored, we suddenly discovered these were pages within the book, and the registrations of births in Dublin in 1780. The statue is outside. That's a statue of Shane O'Reilly. You have Shane's Castle down in Antrim, down on the north of the loch there, and this is also Shane's Castle is also in the grounds. It's right on the edge of the Blackwater on top of a cliff. Shane was a very big friend of Queen Elizabeth I. They were not enemies, which is surprising. They were very actually, he actually went over to see her one time to complain that her agents were harassing his people. So, and they had a great relationship between him and Queen Elizabeth. Or the Lady of the Desert, as the son is called. It seemed that it was the thing to do to train blind people to play music in this time, because they could then go around the big houses and play for their keep, play for their meals, and in a way of giving them a living, so that they weren't destitute or whatever. And so this is a tribute to this Arthur O'Neill here, this piece of music. The Flight of the Earls, it was the end of the chieftains in Ireland. That was the end of the tribes. And the O'Neills, the O'Donnells, the whole lot, all were shipwrecked. They all went off to the continent. They all went away off. As I said, a lot of them became mercenaries. They fought with the Dutch, with the French, with whoever were fighting. They hired themselves out to fight as gallant lasses, as they called them in Scotland. But they were mercenaries, as we talk about today. And they didn't know anything else. They didn't know anything else, only to fight. So they became, and they would have formed brigades on the continent, and there's books and hundreds of books written about the Irish Brigade. And this is who they were. They were these people who were just put out of their homes, just chased. The reason is these books here. The history of these books is these books were in a Servite monastery in England, in Italy. And after the reunification of Italy, under Garibaldi fell out with the church and the Pope, and he started to burn churches and books. And these were smuggled out into England, into Oxfordshire, in the Benburb. And they stayed there in Oxfordshire in England. And then they downsized sometime in the year 2000, or just late 90s. And all was taken and dumped in our attic, down in our basement. And they lay in the basement till around about 2008. And a couple of people got together, saw the books that you're and thought that they were worth trying to save. We applied to the lottery fund, and the lottery fund had no problem funding where you're standing.
We take a short walk to visit the site of Shane O'Neill's castle.
Okay, folks, this is the original site of Shane O'Neill's castle in the 1560s. I'll show you. It's very strategically located, which you wouldn't really realise from being here, standing on this. The cottage at the back only dates from the early 19th century. It was built prior to the Napoleonic Wars. It was built by people who had leased the estate, or part of the estate, in order to do. They took over the mills on the river, and they were in the linen business. Follow me, I'll show you. Now, this would have been where Neil and his secretaries and so forth would have got there. Ground. Terra firma, maybe. 1641.
And so we take our leave of the lovely and tranquil Benburb Priory. And we move onwards to Moy village for a meal at the Ryandale Hotel. And then, onward to LIssan house in Cookstown.
Come to the smaller ones in the back there. Come on forward. Keep on coming forward, Lee. Right, here we go. Just keep going.
We're not finished yet. There's a video being
Listen, house. We have two guides here, so we're divided into two groups. You're divided into two, roughly 24 to you have. You just buy two groups, and Jane will take one group, and Robert will take the second group. So we just go in here and into the hallway here.
To your calls. No, ladies and gentlemen, you're all very welcome here to LIssan House. It's very good to see you all this afternoon. I'll be one of your tour guides, and also our other tour guide is somewhere in the crowd. Gian, there you go. The house is looked after by the LIssan House Trust. We are a group of people that was started up with the last staples who lived here, Hazel Radcliffe Dowling. Maybe some of you remember her, or maybe seen her on TV back in 2000. 400 years to the first of the Staples to arrive here was a young gentleman called Sir Thomas Staples. He came from a place called Yatecourt, which is outside of Bristol. He was the 12th child in his family, so he had a long way to work up before he could get any inheritance from his father. So he decided to come over to Ireland during plantation times and settle down and hopefully to make his fortune. He and his family were imprisoned at the castle at Moneymore. So you know there is no castle in Moneymore. The castle is sort of now where the site of the Orange Hall is in Moneymore. Charity, very good name, Charity. She was Charity Jones, who was Baptist Jones's daughter. Baptist Jones was head of the Vintners Company and part of the worshipful companies of London. He was the wine merchant, stretches over to Londonderry, so quite a good generous bit of land to have. And just at the side of the fireplace you'll see you're still standing in today. It's still a 17th century house. It was built towards the end of the 17th century, and Sir Thomas, one of his family that came on in later years, the gentleman Sir Robert Staples came on and built the house, and we give him the nickname Bob the Builder. Because there's that. Now, the majority of paintings you will see throughout the house, including some of the lithographic prints, is Annie Alexander's, Annie Elizabeth Lindsay Head Staples, and she was the wife of Sir Nathaniel Staples.
There's one thing, however, we do ask you not to touch, and that's the wallpaper. So there are a couple of reasons for that. One, as you might well understand, is conservation. That it's very old. We think it was chosen by this lady, whom I shall introduce in a moment. Probably about 1840, maybe more etiquette or whatever the right word is. Which means that there's a certain way that you refer to people who have married on the floor for dancing. And when the floor was laid, there were no screws or nails in it. Through the 20th century, some other metalwork has made its way into the floorboards. But I just wanted to show you something here. And if anybody is a carpenter and knows anything about this sort of thing, please do tell us. This, I don't know why this was cut, but we lifted it one day, or I lifted it one day is what happened. And it was very interesting because Hazel had explained to me something about how it was put together. Hence, she'd said there were no nails or screws. And as you can possibly make out, end to end, there's a rebate. Same on the other side. And carpenters today call this a biscuit. And that pegs end to end. And it has this wonderful kind of, what I call a knuckle joint. And then I thought, hang on a minute. It's not an eye, it's neither of it is. That's how they put it together. They matched up ends to ends, numbered them, and put it together like jigsaw puzzle. And I'm hoping I've got that the right way in, because sometimes I get it wrong. But it's rather fun to find these things. There was one day on the back of that door, the light caught it, and I could see fractions written on the door. It must have been very badly damaged, and for an extremely long time. Was hand-painted Chinese wallpaper and hand-painted like aristocracy was left without support, and everything started to dwindle. But in the father's time, as I said, he had inherited the house and the title, but not much money, and therefore the fortunes of the stables were on the slide. Unfortunately, in the floorboards, but there you go. Right, folks, we moved next door. And so we've come around the other side. So we're on the other side of the fireplace. Kitty's there on the other side. So where does the door come out? There. Yeah, it comes out. It's rather fun. Every house should have one, I think. Yeah. And why not? You know. From time to time we have murder mysteries in the house, and sometimes this plays a feature. It just goes through. There are various thoughts on why it exists. Sorry, did you want? And a wee bit of spook and whatever. Just keep next Halloween in mind. If you like a bit of dressing up and pretending to be somebody else, it's all a bit fun to do that. It's a good excuse to be somebody else for a little while.
We did one on Zoom last year.
Oh right, well we've had murder mysteries here before, and mostly they're looking for the house, and they usually incorporate people from the past, and that's quite fun. So we can face it with a bit of reality, and we don't have to copy anybody else, which is good. On this side of the house, we're on the north side, it's much cooler. It maybe isn't today because Robert's had the heat on, bless him. But you'll notice it's a good deal darker. It's also darker because there's a huge yew tree out there, which apparently is one of the largest in Ireland. You can't really see how big it is because it's sitting in a hollow and it's large that way as opposed to height. It's an extraordinary place altogether. If I was a bit more able, I'd be in there exploring this, in that the people who are represented here weren't there all at one time, if that makes sense. It's supposed to celebrate the well-known and highly regarded cricketers of the time, information to add, but it's interesting just that, you know, how history repeats itself and all these things go on. But we're not going into that. Ponce had a great relationship, it would appear, with the Prince of Wales, and they met on several occasions. Because obviously Ponce was going in his line of work to make sketches and record the good and the great. But long after Ponce had retired back to Belfast, and he had a studio in Belfast around 1900, 1905, that sort of period, he actually painted a triptych which is in... Can you bring everyone together, please?
Right, we're here.
Here we go. Here is known as Cardinal Manning's Last Reception. And the original of this is in the Archiepiscopal Palace in Westminster. There's another one which is, I think it's out in the hall, and it's Gladstone reading the Home Rule Bill, one of the Irish Home Rule Bills.
So we got our coffee and we had a good lunch, and sure the crack was mighty, and everybody enjoyed LIssan House and Benburb Abbey, and maybe some other day we'll get to the Grant homestead. But anyway, there you are. So we have a pint or two here for Al, and we thank him again for doing what he did for us, and we're not too badly in terms of time getting back. So there you are. So I wish you all a safe onward journey, and I suppose, what do you say until we meet again?